into question worth asking. Each month we introduce a very interesting guest in in our space, and in this show and company, we're trying to introduce a guest where you could learn, share ideas, and get inspired. So today I have a very interesting guest with me. So our guest today, she has worked with agile development for years as a product manager. She has helped to create diverse range of digital products. And her favorite word is empathy, which we will be talking a lot during our session today. Outside work, she loves soccer and samba. If that is not enough, she goes each morning to the beach just to play foot volley. Without further ado, help me in welcoming Annabelle Campos, the product manager at XCG. Hello, Annabelle.
Hello, hi guys. Hello everyone.
So we have a few callers also joining today from all around the world. So I welcome each and everyone, including Annabelle. So guys, go ahead, introduce yourself before we start the show. So first I'll let Louisa, who's joining from Colombia, to introduce herself, and then Maxine, followed by Sembra.
Hi, my name is Luisa. I'm from Bogota, Colombia. I'm an industrial designer, and I have a non-profit organization focused on teacher training development. So I really love to work with human-centered design as a process, not only to provide the trainings for teachers, but also as a strategy for our organization. So that's it.
Thank you. Maxine?
Hi everyone, I'm Maxime. I'm originally from Hong Kong, but now I'm based in Frankfurt in Germany because I work for a pretty cool social enterprise called Roots of Impact that does advisory services for impact investors, philanthropic funders, and public funders on impact investment. But more specifically, we're also running the education arm to educate different players in impact investing field so that they can actually talk to each other and that the market can function. So we have the education project, which is called Social Finance Academy, which also has an online learning platform itself. And that's why I'm also here today, hopefully get some answers and feedback about how to manage your products in the education aspect and also how to improve the UX design of it. So yeah, that's my story.
Thank you. Thank you. Sembra, I think she just dropped. So Sembra is joining from Ethiopia. So I hope she will come back online during the course of this call and get to share her question and get some answers from Annabelle. So again, if you're tuning into this program, this is where we feature someone from the nonprofit sector or the tech industry who works between international development, intersection between international development and technology. So today we have Annabelle, who will be talking about human-centered design thinking, user research. So there's a lot to cover during this session. And please stay tuned, and also people who are watching live right now. We got overwhelming number of questions. Again, only few selected questions we can feature because we have only like 1 hour to get through this. So I'm just about to go into our first question. Annabelle, you ready?
Yes,
okay.
Let's do this.
This question comes from Shauna Wright from here in the US. She wants to know, I'm interested in hearing about Annabelle's journey with human-centered design. So I think that's a good way to again, to introduce yourself and how you became what you're doing today.
Yeah, sure. So I have been working with digital products for 10 years now, amazingly. And I started working at this media company in Brazil, which is actually the web branch of the biggest media conglomerate in Latin America. And I started as I was a communications intern, but I was always really, really interested in product and UX. And my first role was as a product owner. And at this company, I learned a lot about agile methodologies, and that was 10 years ago which was like pretty impressive. But I learned a lot about like agile methodologies and Scrum, and agile. I think agile is like very share the same like principles as human-centered design a lot, like the whole like prototyping and testing, embracing scrappiness, like building something small and building from that, testing and iterating. So that's when I got this like background of like agile background. I left this company to work with a former boss that was actually going to create a startup studio of his own here in Brazil, here in Rio, and he invited me to help him and be the first employer. And I thought it was like a really interesting challenge, and worked with him for 2 years and a half. And we created more than 7 different digital products in those 2 years and a half. And I think that was like kind of like a wake up call for me, because like we had all these different products, but one of them was our favorite one. One of them was our main one. We were like totally in love with that product. We were so sure that idea was amazing. We invested a lot of time, a lot of effort. We had a great team. We had a lot of experience with digital products, and so we were so sure that this was going to be a product that gained traction. And then it failed. It failed miserably. And I think the reason why it failed is because we were so sure that we are such like experienced designers, experienced product people, and that we knew what was going to be a success, that we forgot to ask users what they wanted. We were so sure that this experience was a playful and fun and like amazing experience, but we never actually, before launching it, never actually tested with users. And that's when I decided like that, now I need to be more user-centered. I need to study human-centered design. I need to actually be able to put my biases aside and empathize with my user before doing anything. So that's where I learned like the hard way. Like we had a great team, we had amazing people, and we still failed. So that was the way I learned human-centered design and got more involved.
And so that's how the word empathy became your favorite word, I believe. So you sort of probably tattooed that into your, soul.
Exactly.
But yeah, so what are the most, you mentioned that you, thinking about the end user was one of the things that you sort of learned out of this failure. So other than that, what are the other sort of key learnings you took out of your main failure? Because I think it's good to fail at the beginning of something than, late in the stage, like, we have in the Agile, the quick and, innovate fast, like fail fast to innovate faster kind of. So what are other kind of things that you learn out of this, the failure the first failure?
Yeah, and that was exactly my first learn was that like we created a whole product and we launched the whole product. We created it in like 4 to 6 months and we launched it, instead of actually like creating a small piece of it and launching that small piece and gathering feedback and then analyzing metrics and changing and building on top of that small piece. So that was like exactly the first learn. We did not fail fast. We took like 6 months to fail. We should have failed. We should have learned before. We should have like in 2 weeks, 1 month, prototype something, put in front of users, testing that. And we did not do that. So that was like a big learn.
Okay, thank you. So I'll go into my second question. So that comes to us from Taufika Akhtar. She's from Bangladesh. She wants to know, her question is, I know that human-centered design is a three-step process. How we are to implement it, and it's possible only inspiration and ideation. So I think the question is not a bit clear. But yeah, I think she's pretty much asking about this three-step process. And yeah, also she mentioned about ideation and inspiration. So it's part of this process, right, Amber?
Yeah, so I think her question is more focused on IDEO's version of human-centered design. They have this like version of the process, which is 3 phases, and it's inspiration, ideation, and implementation.
Okay.
And I think like each organization has a different, a different name for phases or different set of phases. But I think the important thing to know, like what human-centered design is, I think human-centered design is like a framework, like it's a philosophy. It's the thing that supports other processes. So the number of phases or how you're going to call the phases that varies by organizations, that varies by your needs. So I think that question is exactly, so they're asking if there is a inspiration, ideation, and implementation phase. So I think they're asking like, how do you implement, or if there is a human-centered design process, there is only the inspiration and the ideation phase and not the implementation. And I think what I think one thing is like, it all depends on what your outcomes are or what your goals are. If you want to just come up with ideas for the sake of coming up with ideas, then yeah, you can actually have the inspiration phase, which is the research phase, then the ideation phase, and stop there. But then you don't actually put anything out there. You don't actually consult your users on your ideas. You don't test them. You don't validate them. So I think like the important part of the what IDEO calls implementation phase and what is the prototype and test phase is exactly these cycles of like prototyping something really small, putting in front of users, getting feedback, getting data, and building on top of that, iterating on that. So I think, yeah, you could have just the 2 phases, but then you would be missing a big part of it, which is like actually testing your ideas.
Okay. And so, okay, the next question is from Irzana Goldin from US. So she wants to know, would you agree that essentially good design is born out of the ability to think critically? And is this a trait we seldom teach in our schools and colleges?
Yeah. I mean, I do believe that, critical thinking and human-centered design are completely related. Because critical thinking is a disciplined thinking that is like clear, is rational, it's like open-minded, and it's informed by evidence. So it's the process of conceptualizing, analyzing, synthesizing, and evaluating information to reach answers or a conclusion. So I think like human thinking left to itself is full of prejudice and like over generalizations, rigidity. So what critical thinkers do is that they train their intellect so that such errors are minimized. So people who think critically, they attempt to live like rationally, empathically as well. And that's also exactly what human-centered design preaches, that you cannot know what is the best for your user by yourself. You have to conceptualize, analyze, synthesize, and evaluate information to get rid of your own bias and beliefs, and really put user needs first. So in that sense, I agree that like critical thinking and human-centered design are totally related. And I guess, yeah, like if this is a trait we seldom teach in our schools. I mean, I'm not that familiar with schools in America, but I can definitely say that in Brazil, yeah, I don't see that being, I see that being really, really rare, which is why we have so many products out there and marketing campaigns out there that totally like miss their marks, that don't put users in the center. They're not actually building any value or solving any needs, because people are not thinking critically about user needs. They are building products that for the sake of it. They're building apps because brands think they need apps, or they are creating websites because the CEO think it's a good idea. And that's backwards, right? Like you create a product to solve a need first. And that's why I think like human-centered design, it's so important, and disseminating that is so important, because people lack that critical thinking.
Yeah, and also the critical thinking, does it like come at the beginning of the research phase, or something that's like ongoing throughout the process, like even during the iterating, implementation, testing, and so how does this critical thinking come into play at the beginning, or it's just right throughout?
I think it's throughout, but I think like in the beginning, it's really, really important. So the beginning, the first phase of human-centered design is the research phase, right? The gathering data, gathering information. And that part is like a part where you have to really get rid of your biases, to come up with lines of inquiry, and to create, user research plan that will get the maximum out of your users, that will help you like really understand your users, really understand their needs, their motivations, their goals. If you go to that phase like already biased on like a solution, or or already with an idea in mind, you're not gonna get that valuable data. You're gonna bias your research. So I think like, yeah, in this part is like really, really necessary to just get rid of like all the information, all the bias that you have, and approach it with a beginner's mind, like pretend you don't know anything.
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you. That's very helpful. So Maxine, it's over to you.
Okay. Yeah, so I do have a question to Annabelle, how to organize the ideas that we have, usually a lot of them, and turn them into features or products with a strong UX focus.
So I think, so first thing, like, are we talking about prioritizing ideas or prioritizing features? I'm not sure, Maxim. Well, I'm gonna talk about both. So first, let me talk about like prioritizing ideas. When you go through an ideation session, what is the ideation phase? It can be like one session or more than one session. But when you come out of the ideation phase, the idea is that like you're gonna generate a lot of different ideas, and be really like divergent thinking, like be broad. And then from there, you want to be convergent. You want to prioritize ideas. And there is a lot of different ways to prioritize ideas on an ideation session, after an ideation session. I think I'm just going to give one example that I really like to do, which is like dot voting. So let's say we had an ideation session, a lot of different ideas, stakeholders are participating. You distribute like different dots, and a limited number of dots to everyone participating, and then you ask them to vote on the best ideas. It's a really simple method, and it's like everyone will vote, and after that you will know like which are the ideas that gain more votes. That's one of the ways, and I think that's more of the easier problem to solve. When it comes to let's say you already have like 3 main ideas that you want to test. What you do is like you try to test them in the lowest fidelity possible. So if there are like 3 different ideas for an app, maybe you can do some paper prototype, sketch a few screens, build some flows on a paper, on a set of papers, and put it in front of users, see how they feel about that. You're already gonna learn a lot about that. And then after that, like you're gonna know like what works well, what doesn't. And then on top of that, you knowing what works well for users, you can add more fidelity, can add more complexity. You already have some validated ideas. So you can, the next phase, maybe build a wireframe and go back to users and put it in front of users again, and do the same thing. So like this process can be done over and over again until you are a little bit more sure of what works and what doesn't. And then when you kind of like already have a set of features that work, or you have to have, or you're gonna be part of your product, but you don't know how to prioritize them. There is one way that I really think works. Actually, there are 2 ways that I use. Like one of them is like having a simple matrix where on one axis you have value. So it's value of that feature. How much value does that feature deliver for your user from low to high? And you're gonna map all the features according to that scale. On another axis, you're gonna have complexity. What is the complexity of building that feature? Same thing, from low to high. And then you can ask like someone more technical to help you with this. But even product managers normally have a little bit of sense of like a level of complexity. So by the end, you're gonna have this matrix where on the top quadrant, you're gonna have the features that have high value and are low complexity. And you start with that. That's the set of features you start with. Then you move on to the set of features that have high value and high complexity. And build that, create a product with that. That's your MVP. That's your minimum viable product. Put that in front of users. See how they feel. And from that, you start to change the things that are not working on a I don't know, weekly, two weeks basis. Always testing and always gathering data through like analytics or whatever tools you have. If you can do A/B tests, even better. Put 2 options in front of users, see what works. But always start with the low-hanging fruit. Always start with the most valuable features with lower complexity.
Okay, thank you. That's a long answer, Annabelle, and it's very, very detailed. Maxine, do you have any follow-up questions or any clarifications that you would want to know? I think she's Maxine. Can you hear me? Okay. Okay. So thank you, Annabelle, for that detailed description. So I'm going to my next question, coming all the way from Nigeria. Clement Dyke wants to know how can create a relearning portal that will provide quality, affordable, accessible education to African students, and how can this portal be accessible through phone. How can provide African student with quality education using smartphone application, and how can design thinking and human-centered design approach achieve this? So pretty much, I think his question is about human-centered design and creating a e-learning smartphone application.
Mhm.
Yeah,
Yeah, that's a long.
there
That's
are
all.
a few questions in that. So
Yeah, yeah. No, I'm good. Yeah, I think thing, the first thing to know is like you need to understand your users. You need to understand these students. What are their day to day like? What motivates them? What are their goals? What are their needs? Um, what are the challenges that they face? What are their habits? What are the tools that they already use? So the first thing is like research. Really be curious about them, understand them. Like what do they need? What problem do you have to solve? Because like thinking about solving the problem of like education for African students is like a really big problem. It's hard to tackle that. It's scary. um, so break that down into smaller problems. Understand your users and break that down into the smaller problems. So instead of thinking about like, yeah, how I can improve education for African children, maybe approach it in a way that, how can I provide, or I can incentivize this type of student to learn for 2 hours at home on a weekly basis. That's a easier problem to solve. So the first thing is that, like, I mean, two first things. One is like learn about your users to break down your problem into smaller pieces. Three, really important. When you understand what their habits are and what are the things that already do are, leverage that. So if they are already on their mobile doing something else, how can you leverage what they're already doing and add some level of like learning to that? For instance, I have been seeing a lot of cool initiatives of learning initiatives using like Facebook chatbots, and it's an amazing way, because it's a conversational way to learn. It's on a platform that people are already on. There's no learning curve. There is no adoption curve. So like even if like you're making users like learn for like 10 more minutes a day, like that's already a change. So start with that. Start small. I think that's my advice in that sense.
Thank you. And actually, like, yeah, he's talking about using like a smartphone or designing like a phone application. I think I think, a lot needs to be covered to get to that question. Like, he needs to create the courses and, authorize them. And, so I think it's a good way to start to leverage whatever the existing kind of applications and learn from that. And maybe sort of, if you have the money, of course, you can go out there and do it. If not, like, source the funding and so forth. So thank you. That's a very helpful answer, Annabelle. Louisa, I would let you go ahead answer your question.
Okay, so my question is, how do you apply human-centered design to analyze trends on your market so you can not only innovate but also generate profits?
Yeah, that's a good question. I'm not entirely sure, like, what do you mean by applying like human-centered design to analyze the trends? Because I think like the way you should look at trends or market trends, they should be your first. That's where you go from. That's where you start. you start looking at market trends, and based on that, you create the whole research plan. So, for instance, let's say you want to build like an education product, and then you analyze your trends, and you see that your market is always uses mobile more than they use their home computers, their desktop. If you look at only that data, only the mobile usage data of the market, you're gonna assume that you need to create an app. But if you actually use that as a start point to dig more into your users or your market, then you can actually create lines of inquiry around that. Like, what? Okay, my market uses mobile phone, but what do they do on their mobile? What kind of apps do they use? What kind of phone do they have? Like, what are their habits with their phones? Then you can like dig more deeply into your users' like needs and motives and goals, and maybe you can find out that while they do use their phones more, they actually only use 5 apps because their phones have limited capacity, and they're not gonna download other apps. And that would point you to a totally different solution than you had in the beginning. That would point you to like not creating an app. That would point you to creating maybe like a mobile responsive website. So I think the market trends should be your starting point to create lines of inquiry, to dig more deep into your user needs and user habits and user goals and motives and challenges. And then from that, you can ideate on solutions to actually solve those problems. And then I think when you ask about like profit, like not only innovate but also create profit, I think like what I've seen work and what I would suggest is to test different types of business models. Let's say you're a service, test different types of plans, see what works, test different ways of describing your service or describing your product. See what generates more interest or more clicks or more conversion. But I think like technology provides us this amazing lab where like today we can actually put things in front of millions of people and gather data, while like when it comes to physical products, you can't actually do that, right? Like so leverage the fact that we can actually test different ways and gather information and build on top of it. I have, for instance, I worked at a online travel agency here in Brazil, and we used to sell like packages and hotels and I was like in charge of A/B testing on how their products were displayed, or how like we talked about our products, and what the description of our packages was. And in the beginning, it was like we had like really straightforward like descriptions, like 5 nights at this hotel plus airplane tickets plus park tickets, and then I test like so many different ways of like approaching that and changing the way like you're describing your product. I tested like trying to be a little bit more human-centered and like putting the outcome in front of users, like 5 nights at this amazing hotel, like steps to a park where your kids are gonna have a lot of fun, or or changing the way I'm displaying the price of the package. Like instead of here, we have a lot of we sell a lot of stuff in installments. So showing the full price versus showing the installments, or showing with a discount, without a discount, and that changes completely. Like just changing the way we describe the package already got us like 15% more clicks. And although it doesn't mean conversions, it means like clicks to a next phase. So if you start like making those little tweaks and here and there and gathering metrics around that, although they are small tweaks and they're small small increases in conversion, when you analyze the whole conversion flow, you can see that makes a big difference.
So in other words, you said that could lead to profit generation.
Yeah, exactly.
Nice. And Louisa, you have any follow-up questions or clarification?
Well, it's not a question. I just want to know if you have like more like tools or strategies to understand the users.
Yeah, I mean, there is a lot of like different user research methods. I think it all depends on what you're trying to achieve. So there's some that we use, for instance, like user interviews. Just go and schedule user interviews and come up with a script, come up with lines of inquiry, and ask users. Another method would be like contextual inquiry, for instance. That means that you follow a user on their day-to-day routine, or if you're trying to build something for user for their work, you shadow them at work, and you ask questions on a contextual basis. Another way is like surveys. You can easily create surveys online and send surveys through like email or SMS. We did that for Philanthropy University, for instance. We surveyed users in Nigeria and in Kenya about their mobile capacity and technology infrastructure. So that's another way. Yeah, there's like a lot of different ways. It depends on like if you're trying to get like qualitative data or quantitative data. And another way is like if you already have a digital product or a website, you can always use analytics and metrics as a proxy, as to hear user needs. Like through analytics, you can see where users are dropping off from your website. You can see where users are landing. You can see where users are clicking. So you can create out of that. You can create hypotheses. So you analyze metrics, or you send out a survey, and you create hypotheses. And then you ideate on like solutions or to those hypotheses, and you put it in front of users and you test with them. And it doesn't have to be a full-formed product. It could be, like I said, like a paper prototype idea, or a mock-up or something.
So Maxine have a follow-up question. Her question is pretty much, she wants to know, Annabelle, related to the same topic. How about tools for organizations that only got like 1 to 3 team members? Which tool works best for such a lean team setting? Like suppose like if you're like comprising of like three people, like is there any way like with unlimited resources probably?
But like tools for what exactly?
To do the
Where
research or analyze the trends, probably. Is it your question, Maxine? Go ahead, unmute yourself. You can, yeah.
A/B testing? Oh, there are a lot of tools out there. There are some like expensive ones. I used to use this one called Optimizely. I'm not sure you're familiar with. It's a really great tool. Really robust. You don't need a developer. Basically, you can kind of change anything on screen. It's amazing. It's so empowering because you can just go to the tool and change the screen and the divs and and it's amazing for someone that is not technical and is not capable of doing that. So it's really empowering. And they have this whole academy as well to learn to teach you how to use the tool. And there is a community as well that you can ask questions and people answer. So there's a lot of support. I really like that one. It's a little expensive, I think, depending on how many page views or how many users you have. But if you're not a like huge, website or platform, then you should be okay. I think like that one is like my favorite one from the ones I have used.
Yeah, and also analyzing trends. Like, is it like a very expensive, like a costly process, or you can do it for cheap?
I mean, I think it all depends again on like what type of information you're trying to get. For sure, there are like some really expensive reports out there, but I think like nowadays it's like really it's easy to get information, right? Like it shouldn't be. You can pay, like if it depends on how like the level of rigidity that you have, also how academic you want to be. I think for digital products, like normally, you don't need the level of rigidity. You don't need that, same like academic standards. It can be a little bit more scrappy, especially because you're like those trends are gonna be only your starting point.
Yeah.
You're gonna learn more. You're gonna iterate. You're gonna try. So you're going to validate your ideas in other ways. So
Right. Thanks, Annabelle. I'm just being mindful here. Like we have about good 20 minutes or so, and we spent so much time on this question. So I'm going to my next question. It's coming from Lee Nguyen from Vietnam. She wants to know what is user research. I mean, again, I think it's a broad topic. You can probably.
Yeah. And I think that I like I mentioned, like user research is the practice of like understanding users.
Maxine, sorry, Maxine, do you mind yourself? Thank you.
So it's the practice of approaching users and understanding their goals, their motives, their needs, their habits, the challenges that they face. And like I said, there's like a bunch of different methods to approach users and to understand them. I already talked about user interviews. I talked about contextual inquiry. There's another one which is like journaling or diary studies, where you ask users for a couple a period of time, like a week or so, it totally depends also, to log everything they're doing in a diary. And then you analyze that. So user research is a way for you to empathize with users, to be able to really put yourself in front of users and look at life or whatever that is that you're researching through their lens.
Okay, thank you. And there's another follow-up question from Kay Lee from US. He wants to know difference between design thinking and user research. Is there like a huge difference between these two?
Yes. I think the difference is that like research is the first phase of design thinking. So, like I said, human-centered design is the framework, right? It's the philosophy, it's the concept behind the set of processes that users use to design experiences, to innovate and design experiences. So human-centered design is just the first foundation. Then design thinking. Design thinking is the set of processes that designers have been using for a long time now to empathize with users, ideate, and prototype and test. So design thinking is exactly that, the phased process that designers use. But it got that name because now it's been used in like other areas, which is great. So design thinking now has been using for services, for learning, for finance, for totally unrelated to design. But it's a way of thinking. It's like putting yourself in front, researching users, to put yourself on their shoes, ideating on solutions based on that, and then prototyping and testing those solutions. So research is only the first phase. So that's why it's so different. While like research stops at like documenting and findings and creating a document or creating insights, design thinking go beyond and actually use that to trigger like innovative ideas and go beyond that with prototyping and testing.
Yeah, thank you. So the next question actually comes from Sembra, who actually tried to come join this call today live, but for some technical difficulties, she couldn't. So I'm going to ask the question on behalf of her. She's from Ethiopia. So she wants to know how much does culture, tradition, social values factor into human-centered design? How do you address them, especially when the designer is not from the community that is being designed for? Very interesting question now.
Yeah, very interesting, especially for us.
So how you take into account the culture, tradition, social values when you are directly disconnected from these communities?
Yeah, I mean, I think like culture, traditions, they factor a lot, because you cannot empathize that easily with someone from a different culture or a different context than you. So when that designer is like so removed from the community they're designing for, it's even more important to focus on the research phase. It's even more important for the designer to really use all the processes and methods that they have to be able to understand the users and understand their habits and understand their needs. So in that way, I think what we recommend is like really immersing the designer into this community. The ideal way would be to immerse the designer into this community, to do some, like I said, contextual inquiry, where the designer is there with the user, shadowing the user for a couple of days, understanding what they go through on their daily basis, understanding what they do, understanding what motivates them. If that's not possible for the designer to be there physically, then I think, for instance, like I mentioned, journaling or diary studies is a good way, where you ask the user to log the data of what they're doing like every day on a journal, and then the designer analyze that. Then you can combine that with user interviews. Like the first step could be the journaling. Then from that, you do the user interviews. So I think in that way, I would combine a bunch of like different ways of researching users, so that like we fill up that cultural gap.
Mm.
And the same thing for testing. Whenever you have a product, you need to test it with that community. Like it doesn't make sense to research them and then test with a different set of users, right? So you have to test with the same community.
And while you mentioned this, another thing popped into my head, like how useful it would be to include some people in as like researchers or like as designers from those communities, if possible, into this. Do you think it would be a good idea as well?
Totally, yeah, exactly. That's a really good point. Yes, including them in like not only the research, doing a more participatory research, but also on the ideation phase is like really helpful as well. So having those the final users ideating with you is like a really rich experience. And users feel like that they are part of the creation of the product.
Yeah.
So
exactly.
yes.
Thank you, Amber. So the other question we have is okay. There are so many questions. I'm just selecting a few from here. So there's a very interesting question that I saw here. I'm just trying to. Okay, this is from Stephanie Bravo from the United States. She wants to know, when designing any sort of programs / products, how do you prioritize what to pilot, launch first, and then how do you rank other priorities? I think you briefly touch on this. Do you have any, or like, can I move to another question?
No, yeah, I think like we touched a lot on that when I answered Maxine's questions.
Yeah, there's another like a practical problem with Kayla Ware from the United States. She wants to know what pushes you through the intent stage of creation into the action stage. I have noticed that at times I struggle to break through the invisible wall.
Yeah, that's a really good question. I think the answer to that is like keeping it simple. You know, okay. The answer to start something is like keeping it simple. If the problem that you're trying to solve is too big or it's too complex, you're gonna get stuck. You don't know how to start. So breaking it down into smaller problems, and then like start doing it. Like just a little bit kind of like too simplistic, but just do it. Create a prototype again on paper or on a deck or on a doc, something really simple. Just put something in front of users, because then you like start getting a little bit more validation, and then you build on top of that.
Okay. I think we have about another 7 minutes, and most likely this will be a last question, depending on how long answer you're going to give this. So the next question is from Kimbe Constant from Cameroon. He wants to know, hi Anna, what is human-centered design all about, and what are its benefits? So you have already mentioned about what is human-centered design. I think it's good to sort of touch upon the sort of the benefits of human-centered design, or even watching new to this, like how can this could be incorporated to your work, and what are its benefits?
Yeah, so the benefits that I see, one is like you're guaranteeing that what you're designing is relevant. That because you're grounding it on user needs, you're guaranteeing that what you're designing actually solves a problem. That there is product market fit for that. So another benefit of it is that you get to be more innovative, because you are ideating, you're generating a lot of ideas, and you're being, like I said, like divergent and then convergent, and then you're getting more of the innovative ideas. And then the third one is like, because you're testing constantly, you don't fall in love with an idea and risk building something that doesn't make sense for the users or that doesn't work. So you're always like probing your assumptions. You're always questioning. You're always making sure that that you're failing. Actually, you're embracing failure, and when you're failing, you're learning. So you make sure that you fail small, so you don't fail big.
Great. Seems I can just go into another question, probably, since I've got like the 5 minutes. The next question is from Laredo Nocos from Philippines. Wants to know, how can you apply human-centered design to marketing and communications? Probably, I think she's working in this marketing and communication field and wants to sort of incorporate this human-centered design. Is it possible to do that in marketing and communications?
For sure. For sure. It's the same. You use the same process, but instead of like building a product, you're creating, you're creating campaigns, or you're creating marketing assets, or messagings. But yeah, it's the same. You can use the same process, like understanding what your market needs, because that's what an effective marketing does, right? Understand their needs. So understanding their needs, then ideating on the best way to approach them, like the best way of messaging them, the best channels, the best types of campaigns that you're gonna have, and then testing those, prototyping and testing. Like there's so many marketing channels nowadays, like with social media and digital media, that like testing is like really easy. You can like create different campaigns on Facebook, on Google, on different channels. So testing different campaigns, testing different channels, testing different messages, testing different landing pages. So you can totally use human-centered design for marketing purposes the same way.
Thank you. Are there any good resources, like someone's like keen to read about this? Like, are there any like good blogs or like a good book? If you have any like some of your favorites, feel free to share. So
yeah, I have a lot of like great stuff. I think like the best stuff is like IDEO has like, I don't know how many design thinking and human-centered design toolkits. So they have like human-centered design, like focused on learning. They have a toolkit for that. Human-centered design focused on social innovation. They have a toolkit for that. So IDEO has a lot of really good content, really good stuff. I would definitely start there.
Great, thank you. And so people who want to stay in touch, do you have like a Twitter account, or like I'm sure you're on LinkedIn? And feel free to look up Annabelle. So Annabelle, thank you again. We're almost like 2 minutes away from cutoff time. So thank you so much, Annabelle. I'm very grateful, in spite of you being on vacation, you took the time to sort of, join us. And I hope you had the morning dose of your football on the beach. If not, please go ahead, play. And also I got to know that you love dogs. So I hope you run into more dogs today. And that's what your colleague says. And thank you, both Maxine and sorry, I just for a second I lost your name. Luis from Colombia. Yeah, thank you so much. Thank you, guys. So we are looking forward to inviting another guest next month. Until then, I'm again saying thank you, and over and out from Philanthropy University. Have a good day and take care.